No, God sees me. That was his message. I know this about you because God told me. God sees you. He would even say, God knew that you were going to be here today. God knew. So you all have to understand that he was really doing this in the name of the Lord. And so please don't gaslight the victims. It's not their fault. Hey, everyone. I just want to welcome you to this week's podcast. This podcast is going to be very special. It's a unique podcast. And the reason I'm saying that is, as you all know, Seth and I were in the series about Hurt by the Church. And we were talking about all these different experiences in the church. And then this bomb dropped this last week. And it's something that Seth has been, I think, a part of and kind of involved with in different ways and experienced it in a lot more depth. And so I just want to start by saying that we both, by a series of events, were able to record today. God has separately put the exact same thing on both of our hearts strongly. And so I just want to start out by saying we're going to be talking about the whole situation with Shawn Bolz. So just if you don't know about that, Shawn Bolz was a very strong prophetic leader in the Charismatic Movement. He had really a worldwide influence. He was platformed at Bethel, and there were a lot of egregious things that ended up happening, a lot. And they go all the way into lots of fake words, doing a lot of things like there's sexual abuse. And I want to just say that right off the bat, because if you're tuning in, we're not here to get into all of the nitty gritty. I will tell you that Mike Winger did a 6-hour long video on this whole thing. He did it beautifully with such a righteous heart. He didn't even monetize it. And so if you really want to know all of the ins and outs, you can watch his video. It's done in honor. It's done with timestamps. It's honoring things. But both Seth and I were strongly feeling that there were things that we really need to talk about in this whole situation, because it involves somebody who was definitely a wolf in sheep's clothing to a degree that is beyond, and we'll talk about that more as we get into this. But it also does involve leaders who I think a lot of times did do the right thing and didn't do the right thing here. And then that had a lot of implications, but it's not so cut and dry. And so I've been involved in lots of these kinds of situations, but this is one that is really close to Seth and Seth's heart. And so I just want to also say to all of you, Seth is processing right now. So I think some things he's very clear on, some things he's feeling conflicted on. So he's in a place where he really feels like I can process this here and feel great about that. But I just wanted to speak to that because this can be reeling for lots of people. So I just want to say from my heart to yours, Seth, I'm so grateful that and honored that you want to talk. Like I'm really, really grateful and honored because the way where you sit, what you know, what you're about to say, I think is going to help so many people. But it also takes a lot of courage and just transparency to be honest and talk. So thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it.
Yeah. I think I have one of many people have a unique probably perspective on this because I was on staff at Bethel during all this. I was there. I was in those meetings. I was there. And like last episode that we did, Church Hurt 2, I shared stuff. I said, I needed, because of where I'd been hurt by men, pastors, as a child, as a young adult, where pastors had hurt me, men who preached the Bible had hurt me. I talked about how God used men who preachers, pastors, to heal me. And Bill Johnson, Chris Valentin, Danny Silk, Dan Fairley, all the guys that were involved in this, they're the men who healed me. They're the men who healed my pastor wounds, my leader wounds, my spiritual father wounds. Those are the men who changed my life because they were so full of integrity and so full of love, and still are. Like I have the utmost respect for them, and so, that's what we talked about last episode. But I think being on staff, knowing them, I know them, and also knowing victims. I know a lot of the victims. I I know more of the victims than I wish I knew. But so potentially I have a unique perspective on this, and there's a bunch of us that do as well, who are all involved at a different level. But yeah, this morning, because yesterday was a big day, I had a long day just talking with victims and leaders. And my wife was asking me this morning, "How you doing?" Like, I slept in today. I didn't sleep in. I just laid in bed for a while to process what was going on, and I'm still in process. But my wife asked me today, we were on our walk, and she's like, how you doing? Yesterday was a big day. I said, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. And, like, that's where I'm at. I feel like I've been hit by a truck. Still kind of feel it. And so my heart's broken. My heart hurts. I have a lot of anger and a lot of pain and a lot of sadness and there's a lot happening in there. And yeah, I guess we're going to talk about some of that. Like, I know both sides very well. And I know, let me just go here for a minute. I knew, like, I was there when the first ever accusation, not accusations, I thought they were accusations came out about maybe Shawn's getting these words off Facebook, maybe these aren't real. I was there for that, and I couldn't believe, like, I was there when Shawn gave the word about Bill's dad. I was sitting right there. I watched that whole thing. I was in the room when he gave the word about Melvin, Bill's dad. Like, it was so profound to me. And I think what happened in my heart at that time was, like, when people started, there was only a couple people saying, like, he's getting these off Facebook. This isn't real. He's tricking everyone. He's deceiving everyone. In my heart, I was like, there's no way that you would do that to Bill Johnson. There's no way you would do that to him, because this man loves you. This man's yours. Put you on this stage. This man, like, you would never do that to Bill Johnson. And then I was there. I wasn't in the room. I was in the other campus when Shawn gave the word about Charlotte. That's in the 5-hour video, 5-hour, 50-minute video. Like, Shawn gave that word about Charlotte and her dog Maverick. Like, I was just at my friend's house petting that dog a few days before. I know the dog. I know Charlotte. Charlotte was in my kids' church. I couldn't believe that someone would do that to Charlotte and to Bill. I couldn't believe it. Like, there was no way. Like, you can't be that heartless to give a fake word to a girl who I know and love, and to her family, to her dad, who I know and love. No one would be that heartless. No one would do that. Like, I couldn't. So I don't know if this is, like, I feel like I need to apologize for not even being able to. I couldn't see the truth simply because I couldn't believe, partly because I couldn't believe someone would even do that, and let alone do it in the name of the Lord and representing the Lord. I couldn't fathom that was even possible at the time. So I didn't even entertain it. And then I knew, because I've been involved in these a lot, not necessarily directly involved, but I've watched so many people fail, and I've watched Bethel take them through the process of restoration, but not just restoration for the leaders. I've watched Bethel handle restoration for the leaders and the victims simultaneously, and the process that they take leaders through to hear the victims, to the victims get a voice, and the leader who's in repentance has to take it. Like, I've watched that process happen. I know people who've gone through that process and actually repented, and they've been fully restored, and so have all the victims. All of it, like, and those people out of their mouth said, I wish Bethel would have just punished me and fired me and sent me on my way because of what I did. I wish they would have just punished me instead of disciplined me, because the discipline that I had to go through to restore and listen to the victims and help the victims and hear them out, that was so much worse than if they had just fired me and sent me on my way and washed their hands of me. And so I thought, going into all this, I'm like, you know what? If this is real, for one, I can't believe Shawn would do this. I can't even believe it. And that was my error. And then I just knew, like, if Bethel's on this, if they're on this, if they're the ones in charge of restoration, it's going to be good. Now, I didn't know Shawn would refuse to repent. Like, this is some of my language. Like, I've only seen it where either someone actually repented and they went through all the pain of hearing the victims out and watching the victims get restored, and them getting restored simultaneously. I've seen it. But I've only seen people who actually repented, or I've seen people who pretended to repent and then got caught lying. And I've watched the whole process. I've watched the whole process and been involved in one directly. And I'm like, I just knew if Bethel's on this, it's going to turn good. And unfortunately, it didn't. Like, there were massive mistakes made. I think Bill said it so clearly. This is Bill's superpower. This is his superpower. This is his strength. And strength overemphasized becomes a weakness. And because it's such a strength, it became a weakness, a big one in this case. But I've also seen it play out as a massive strength and really bring true restoration to victims and to the leader at the same time. And so I kind of was like, oh, Shawn's in good hands. And this is going to be really painful. And this is going to be really, this is going to turn really good. And then it didn't. And I mean, it is now. It's turning better for sure now. But yeah, those are some of my initial thoughts. I don't know. I feel like I could probably talk for hours, but some of it would still be reaction mode, because I've still been hit by a truck, basically, and I've watched other friends put out their statements and their thoughts, and yeah, I'm still piecing mine together, but this is some of them right now.
Thank you for that so much. I wanted to, there's a couple of things that you said, I think, that are really important, and it's something you and I were talking about before we got on. And that is, I think what may be a little bit hard to glean if you watch Mike Winger's video, which again was just a hand of God done really, really well. But of course, Mike's just pulling these quick clips of Shawn giving those words. They're called words of knowledge for those of you that maybe don't know the prophetic language, but it's like words of knowledge. In other words, he would be up speaking, and then he's saying, is there anybody here that has this address, or does this number mean anything, or this name? And so somebody would stand up, and then he would have this information that he would say about them, that he would say was given to him by God. And of course, what happens for the person who's being called out, they feel incredibly special. When you just see the little clips, it's a little easier to see, like, oh yeah, I could see where he could have totally gotten this information off of Facebook, even though in the moment he does this really great job of being like, oh, that's your address? Oh my gosh. Like, he does this real surprise thing. But what you don't get to really glean is what actually happened before that. So and I think this is so important, because having been on the outside and just going to a couple of talks of Shawn's and seeing him in action, I think it's really important for people to understand that he would do this whole, whether you want to call it a sermon or a talk, and he would really draw you in, and he would draw you in not because he was flashy. I mean, he was well spoken, but he wasn't flashy. He was the normal average guy that's up there, that loves the Lord, that has this calling. He came across in humility, but also would give a lot of inspiration. You'd feel inspired by the mission trips he'd been on, the children that he touched in other countries. And so by the time he would get to words of knowledge, whether it was in the middle or the end, you were already trusting him. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he's doing this. Who is this guy? You were already bought in. And so I think it's really important, because there are people that I've heard say, this is what happens when we make people famous. This is what happens when people don't focus on Jesus. And I don't want to have that posture. I don't think it's fair to the people that have been victimized. The truth is that a lot of us who are honest and trying to follow Jesus would just never anticipate that somebody could be, like Seth said, that cruel, that somebody could go up there and get up on a stage and call people out in fake ways and give these fake words based on information they had mined, because it's harmful. And the truth is, for many of us, I spoke to one person who said this, and I'm like, I totally align. I fear God way too much to go up there and do that. Like, I would be so afraid of the Lord, I would never do that. And so that's why when people say, oh, Christians are gullible or Christians are this, and it's like, that's not true. It's, you do expect another person in the body to behave like a believer. And to Seth's point, Shawn was platformed by Bethel and by Bill, probably for some of the same reasons. So it even solidified his trust more. And the truth is, it's not that people felt like when he gave these words, oh, it's Shawn that's making me feel special. No, God sees me. That was his message. I know this about you because God told me. God sees you. He would even say, God knew that you were going to be here today. God knew. So you all have to understand that he was really doing this in the name of the Lord. And so please don't gaslight the victims. It's not their fault. There's a woman named Jubilee, you can look her up too. Because of the word that Shawn gave, she ended up marrying this guy. He tried to kill her. He was very, very abusive. And when you see how it was all set up and how it happened, it's egregious. But that was so important when you said that, Seth, because it's not fair to people who have been harmed to take this posture like, well, if you just didn't. It's not the right posture. It's not God's posture, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think that's another layer of pain. I've seen some people, some Christians commenting on some of this, going like, you were supposed to take this to the Lord. You were supposed to pray. You were supposed to find out if this was really from God, and just putting it all on the victims, of like saying things like, quit playing the victim because you should have had discernment. You should have went to the Lord with this. And I was talking to a friend. I'm like, I was in those meetings. It would have been really challenging. It was like I already said, it would have been very challenging if you got one of those words to not think it was from God, because of the way Shawn did it, and because of the history that he already had as a leader, as a speaker, because of the platform he was on, because of the trust he already had in people's hearts, because of the message that he spoke before he gave the word. It would have been so hard to go, you know what, let me pray about that and see if that's really from God. Now that's what we were all taught, like, eat the meat, spit out the bones. Like, maybe not all this is from God. Maybe some of it's just him. But the way was so accurate and so clear and so like, yeah, wow, God knew you were going to be here. Like, just the way that was all done, it would have been so difficult as a person receiving the word not to think God's talking to me right now. It would have been so hard. And it breaks my heart that people write comments like that, of like trying to put it all on the victim. Yeah, of course, everyone has a responsibility when we get a word to go like, let me take that to the Lord. Let me pray into it. Let me take it to some counsel and go, hey, should I make this big decision? Yes, of course, that responsibility is there. And simultaneously, it would have been so difficult not to think it was from God. I mean, when Shawn was giving these words, like I was like, wow, God, like this is amazing. Like we were all just shocked at how God could do that. And we know God could do that. We know God could do that. We know God knows everything, every detail. But I think that's one of the areas that's really hard too, is like of course everyone has responsibility to take that, and it would have been so hard to not just go, this is God. This is God. I'm going to act on it because this is the Lord.
Well, and the other side of that too, Seth, is I was talking to somebody about this the other day who said, I got words from Shawn, maybe not from the platform, but I got words that were real, like they did come true. And I have friends that also got words about a church that they have, and they did come true. And this is another thing that I just wanted to speak into also is, the church in Corinth is a really great study if you really want to understand like the gifts of the Holy Spirit and how they really are gifts. Like they are without repentance. And it's a terrible thing, but somebody could have really horrible character and still be walking in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And it can get really mixed up for people because of that. Now, that being said, if you dive deeper into that study, there is also a call though, that if you're going to do what Shawn did, which is live this horrible life, hurt people, not just with words, but in other action, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that at some point it's going to rip you apart. I mean, Paul is very clear. Like the church in Corinth, like I said, they were living very like what we would call pagan lifestyles. Many of them were sleeping around, not doing the right thing. They understood gifting because they came from a pagan culture. They didn't even understand how the gifts worked. They thought that there was a different like spirit over each one of the gifts. I mean, the Apostle Paul had to explain to them it's one Holy Spirit
Yeah.
who gives out these different gifts. Like he had to break that down for them, but they were still moving in the gifts. But if you go a little further in the journey, they were also getting drunk at communion. They were doing really awful things. And there's a point where Paul said, this is why many of you are sick and some have even fallen asleep, which means they have died. So there's still a call to carry the gifts righteously, but there's also an understanding that somebody could have even some anointing. And even though eventually if they use it in destruction will come upon them, it's also can be confusing to people. And so that's why, to Seth's point, the scriptures, if you look at it biblically, the scriptures are calling out the wolves in sheep's clothing. They're not going after the sheep for not hearing it right, because the weight is on the wolf, right? The weight, and to Seth's point, the weight is also on people in spiritual authority to also do the right thing. Like there is weight on there too. So I just think that's important to stop with. Let's not bash the people that got hurt. Like the truth is, this is somebody that I think was very, unfortunately, wickedly skilled and hurt a lot of people. And we want to help the people who are hurt and stop the perpetrator, not go after the victims. So that was my thoughts about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not fun what's happening. And at the
No.
same time, it's good. Like, it's good. I feel sad that it took that video to get to where we are. And I'm so thankful for that video. I'm also really thankful of how Bethel leadership did respond on the Sunday morning. And like, so thankful. Like, now everyone knows. And that's a good place to be. It's not a fun place to be. It's a painful place to be, but now everyone knows. And it's like, okay, now real healing can happen. Now broken trust can be at least invited to be restored. Now now God can work it for good because it's all out there. And yeah, I
I
don't know
agree.
what other thoughts you have,
Yeah.
Sandy.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a starting point. Like you said, it's a starting point. I will say, I had mixed feelings. I think probably like Seth, where by their own admission, there were just some things that were really, really mishandled. And I've seen this situation before where you have somebody who isn't repenting, and it's almost like there's no game plan for that. And it's like, then it starts to become, well, I think he's not doing it anymore. I think he's in, stopped the behavior.
And
And it
getting
just
help.
really, really isn't enough by any means. It's not really repentance. And, I think sometimes people who have maybe in the past done the right thing or had a really good method for handling things can fall and fall mightily from a whole series of events. And I know, the thing about something like this is we can hold somebody in love and honor and go, man, they were in a tough position and this is hard, and still be like, wow, that was really, really mishandled. Like both are true at the same time. And that's where I think that's where the challenge is that sometimes it's both. And that's where it can be really, really painful. Um, I remember uh, several years ago when there was a really bad situation at a church that I attended, and I was in the thick of it. I was really involved. I was really close to them, really close to the leaders, but then I was helping a victim who'd been very victimized by leaders and by a previous church member. And they started to do the right thing and then just turned on the victim, turned on me. And it was horrible. I mean, it was painful on so many levels. I think that church leaders sometimes don't realize the authority that they carry in people's lives. And I don't just mean because they're up here and other people are down here. I mean the power of their presence. So when I think of what I teach on, or what we teach on, even on when it comes to belief systems, like the things that we believe about our identity are formed by people that are very important to us when we're children. So when people in authority or parents and caregivers do things well, we form these really great identity belief systems. When they do things really bad, we form really bad ones. And so when we come into a community of believers, the scriptures say, too much who has been given, much is expected. Leaders and people in leadership positions kind of hold those places in our heart. They do hold parental kind of roles and places in our heart. And like Seth's experience, sometimes that can make it worse, and sometimes it makes it a lot better. Like Seth had a lot of healing from that. And I think that's why this is hard to process. And so I think it's important that people understand that when people hold those positions of leadership, like, yes, not only do they have a commitment to the body, but even to the victim. Like, they have to understand that you hold something in within you that God has given to you, where if you speak in and if you stand up and do the right thing, it's part of their healing process. And so
Yeah.
it sounds like with Bethel, there's times they've done that in amazing ways. And then this time that didn't happen at all, and it became more harmful. And that's what's hard. The other thing that I did want to mention, because I think this is important for people to understand too, Seth, is again, watch the long video. I don't need to get into the nitty gritty, but Shawn also did a lot of things that were completely, they were abuse. It's sexual abuse. There's no other way to say it. It's not just like inappropriate behavior. It's not like moral failure either. I think as a body, we need to get better at stating things for what they are. Moral failure is like, let's say I'm married, I'm a pastor, and let's say that I meet somebody and I start a relationship. That's a really severe moral failure. And I'm going to have to be taken out of leadership and, all of that stuff, right? All of that stuff. But it isn't illegal. It isn't like I can't go be put behind bars, or there can't be any more action taken beyond the church needs to do the right thing and deal with the sin. But then there are things that people do that go a step beyond that. And sometimes I feel like people think of it as like it's all lumped into one category, and it's not one category. So I think it's important for people to understand too that even though a lot of Shawn's victims were adults, like they weren't children, it's still not legal to be in a position, in a clergy, pastoral position, even a boss. And even though he may not have physically touched someone, he had them in a room. Did completely wrong things. He was naked, touching himself, all that stuff. Like that's another level. And I just wanted to say that because please don't think that because the person in the room was an adult meant that they're not the victim. They're the victim. There's a power play here. There's a power dynamic, and that is another level of like sin. That's not just like a moral failure. We've shifted from, man, that person really fell, to like, you are a full blown predator now. You are preying on people. And I wanted to mention that because, again, I think, I know Seth does, I have a huge heart for the people who are victimized in all this. And I did feel like there's a battle cry in the Lord's heart of that we need to do better about helping the victims. And I know, Seth, you probably know some of them, and you probably know these stories way more deeply than what I'm saying. But I just wanted to make sure that people out there knew, don't for a moment put somebody who's been in that situation in the same like category as somebody who's had an affair, because it's not. Like, it's not at all. It goes way beyond that. It's the level of, and I'm not saying the affair is okay either. Of course it's not.
Right.
But the level of evil and the level of predator that it takes to do that is a darkness. And it goes way beyond just like, oh, we need to manage this sin. Like this is like super serious.
Yeah. And Sandi, I know last time we talked about this in the second video before this bomb dropped. One of the things you said was there's a difference between spiritual abuse and church hurt.
Yes.
And, what we saw with Shawn was spiritual abuse and sexual abuse, like with his team and staff. So, but you had said there's a difference between spiritual abuse and church hurt. But to go back to a little bit to the whole spiritual authority, the leaders and stuff, and all of this goes into, like you said, the context of family, because in a sense, like, these are spiritual fathers, spiritual mothers, brothers and sisters. Like, it's very much a spiritual family. I think some of what happened was Shawn was the abuser, and in family, there's people that are hurt, kids that grow up in a lot of pain because they were abused. Yeah. But there's also kids who grew up in a lot of pain because they were neglected. And I think that's what it seems like happened here. Was Shawn was the abuser, the church and the people who got the words were the victims, the abused, more so the people who got the words, obviously, than the people just sitting in the congregation. But everyone was abused by Shawn. They're all victims. But then what happened with the discipline process felt like, to put it in the context of family, it felt like some neglect. And that's what was so hard for me. And all of this was like, this is not the discipline that I know. This is not the discipline that I've seen. This is not the Bethel that I know. This is not how this normally goes. And I don't have all the information and know everything, but that's what I felt like in processing myself. Was like, yeah, you have church hurt, you have spiritual abuse. Okay, there was a lot of spiritual abuse happening, and there was some neglect happening in the family. I don't think it was intentional neglect, but that's the language I kind of have for it. Was like, a lot of victims got neglected after they'd been abused. It's almost like you and I know people who they were abused by one parent horribly, and the other one kind of stood by and let it happen, or pretended like it didn't happen. And so you've got this kid that grows up in both abuse and neglect simultaneously, and it causes so much pain. And Yeah, I don't know if that helps put language to some of what I see that happened here and what caused so much of the confusion and the additional pain. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it. I felt like, fathers discipline, and typically grandpas don't. Grandpas are the ones that are like, oh, you got kicked out of school, come on, we're going to go ride four-wheelers and shoot guns and eat cookies. And they're that source of unconditional love without the need to discipline. And what I felt like happened here was spiritual grandfathering. Shawn was being treated like a grandson, not like a son. And yeah, it made a big mess, made a really big mess for everyone.
Yeah. I really appreciate the analogy of what you gave about the abusive parent and the parent that doesn't do anything. I mean, that was my home to a T. I've often said my mother was not the one who was abusing me. It was my father, and there were many others. But in the home, my father was so abusive, and yet in my story, I've said it often. I had a lot of wounding with my father, but because my mother didn't do anything, I had almost more with her. It's kind of weird how that happens, but she was supposed to be the safe one. And because in being the safe one, she didn't do anything, it compounded the abuse that was happening to me. In other words, I felt like, oh, it's my fault because the safe person isn't doing anything. So therefore, it must be my fault. And it almost felt like it took the wounds and kind of further internalized them. And I think that's a great analogy. It reminds me of, I read it in a book. There was a situation that happened. I don't even remember the country, but a lot of people know the story. There was a woman who was attacked like in broad daylight in this country. And it happened in broad daylight, and lots of people were around. It was a public place, and she ended up dying. And the public outrage was not against the person who attacked her. It was the people that were milling around that did nothing. And so I think I can understand why there's so much hurt with Bethel, not because they're the ones that were perpetrating, but it's that's how it feels, I think, for people. And I think, Seth, to your point, because probably Bethel has done such a great job of doing discipline and shepherding and making sure that victims were healed, that's probably also why it hurts, and probably why it's been hard for you to process it too, because it just shows you that both are the case. But I do just want to speak into just even what they did when they got up there and they were in apology and all of that. I
Can
get
I,
that it took way too long, but yeah.
yeah, can I say something real fast, Sandy,
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
to go off that story you told from the country where the outrage was against the people who stood by and did nothing. Like, I think part of that story is everyone thought someone else was calling the police. Everyone thought someone else was going to handle it. And
Yeah.
that's what happens. We've talked about, we've not, you and I, but this has been a common thing of like, sometimes we go, oh, there's a whole bunch of people watching this. Someone's got it. Someone's going to call. Someone's going to do something. And it's not like it's this intentional thing. And as you were sharing, I was like, oh, that's totally what I did. I thought someone else is on this and I know they're really good at this and this is going to be okay. So I just trusted someone else was going to handle it and someone else was going to do something. And, and then it turned out nothing happened and it got to where it got. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, I
But
love that.
I think that's how some of this happens is for, at least for me, I was like, I know how this is. Someone else is calling. Someone else got this. And
Totally.
I was wrong.
Totally. Well, totally. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that can be the nature of these things. And I was getting like actually a word even as you were talking. I feel like uh God is working in this. Like I don't want that to be lost on anyone. I have to tell you all, when I say I have been involved with these types of situations, I never thought God would call me to that. It's doesn't even feel like one of my strengths. I really dislike confrontation. Like I can really be avoidant when it comes to confrontation. I don't like it. But when I say that, God has called me to a lot of these situations, it extensively, and I have yet to see any leaders like come back to the table and be like, completely blew this. So when I say it's a good first step, like it's an amazing first step. Like, yes, there were major, major things that got blown, but when I tell you that I have seen this story play out so many times in all these different ways in all these different faith communities, I believe that what God is calling us back to is to realize that we are all one body. I think what has happened, and I've been feeling this call for a very long time, when we're in heaven, Jesus isn't going to say, okay, I'm going to go hang out with the evangelicals, and now I'm going to go hang out with the Baptists, and now I'm going to hang out with the charismatics, and now I'm going to hang out with, he's not going to do that. And when the church was an early church, they had different kind of cultures because of where they were located, but there was a connection, and they had no internet. I'm sorry. They had nothing, but they were writing letters, but there was more of a connection. There was an understanding that even though they were operating in these smaller bodies, they were part of they were part of a body. They were part of a kingdom. And I do believe that one of the things that is happening in this is that God is calling us back to recognizing that we are a body and a kingdom. I think that you have, again, I'm bringing Mike into this again, Mike Winger, who is this guy who Lord chose, and he's not intimately involved with anyone there, but the Lord chose him, and he did it in a great way. But it brings it back to this, like, oh, we're a part of the body. Like when one part suffers, we all suffer. And I think the other challenge that I've experienced too, Seth, and I'm sure this is probably can be part of it for you. The other side that's really, really hard, especially when you're on the side of the sexual abuse side, is that when you are talking to an adult who's been victimized as an adult, who doesn't want to take charges forward, you can't. So one of the situations that I was involved with an adult. There were things that I reported because there were things that happened when they were younger, even though reporting is easier these days, but it's still not easy. But there were people that were involved in positions of authority, pastor, associate pastor, who was also a therapist, who completely buried abuse. And I got so frustrated. I mean, I even reached out to the board that's over the therapist, and they wouldn't do anything. I mean, so sometimes too, when there's witnesses that what healing for them is to bring their story forward, and what's healing for them is just to see this person in accountability, I think you have to remember that as well. I think there was some of that. And that's why, just so everybody knows why I think it came out the way that it did with Mike. And to Seth's point, yeah, it should have come out sooner. But at the same time, I have to say, having been involved with situations like this where things are so horrific and then it never ever comes out, nobody will take accountability. Even, I mean, there was one situation I was involved with in where there's still lawsuits, like there's pending lawsuits, and it was a network of churches, and I'll say the name because if you know this network of churches, stay away from it. International Churches of Christ, International Churches of Christ, and now they've done another one, RCW, whatever that means. They just keep splitting and creating the same toxic, abusive environment time after time after time again. The leader, who is the ringleader, has been outed with all kinds of stuff. Like that environment doesn't want to get healthy. So stay away from it. Don't be involved in their churches because you're going to be connected to something really, really bad. But there was never a person there ever who has just contritely come forward in a leadership position and been like, I harmed people. I blew it. Like nobody's doing that. So the fact that Bethel is doing that is really beautiful. And at the same time, what I don't want us to miss is the victims. Because even for me in the situation I was involved with before, I mean, I've had sleepless nights. Could I have done more, Lord? Could I have, could I have spoken up more? Did I warn people as much as I should have? Did I use my voice in the way that I should have? I mean, it's hard to navigate it sometimes, especially when other people are in authority and they're the ones that seem to be taking it and you think they're doing the right thing. But I just also want to say that I think that series that we started, Seth, when we were talking about church hurt, not knowing this was all going to come out and blow up, that was the heart. Like, let's really be about supporting the victims to heal and supporting the people that were hurt versus like blaming victims should have known better. Let's stay away from that, but we really want them to be helped. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I know. This is healthy. Like all of this is healthy to come out into the light. Darkness, anything in darkness has power. And so this whole thing is losing its power because it's coming to the light. And I know I'm just processing so much and thinking about so much with all this and looking at so many things and talking with so many people. Like I'm still at the beginning. Like I feel like I've shared what I could right now, and
yeah,
just hearing you is good. And yeah, I'm just thankful. I'm thankful for all of it in a sense, except for what happened. But I'm not thankful for that. I'm thankful in that, and I'm thankful that all of it's coming out into the light, because this is where freedom starts to happen, and this is where healing starts to happen, and this is where damaged trust can at least have the invitation to be rebuilt. And yeah, this is where people can really be affirmed and like, oh yeah, I was really hurt, really victimized, and we want the victims to be healthy and healed and whole.
Oh, it is the cry. And I'm telling you all, you're probably going to hear my passion come through here. Like, this is the cry of the Father's heart. Please don't take this stuff and go, oh, that's why I can't stand churches, or that's why I can't. Like, don't do that. Like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The reason we don't hear about all the healthy stuff is because it doesn't need correction. The reason we don't hear about all the beautiful stuff is because it doesn't need to be redirected. But understand that, yeah, it's messy, and yeah, it sucks. It does. It's terrible. I mean, even when God was like, I want you to I watched the whole 6-hour thing. I was like, it's 6 hours. Like, you want me to watch that? Why? But there's a call that this stuff be brought into the light and healed. And I don't know why this is coming up, Seth, so I just want to share it because I want people to understand the difference in already what's happened. And I think Seth and I will revisit this topic as we move along, because I think there's other things that are probably going to happen. But so the International Churches of Christ was a movement. There's a mainline Church of Christ. So you probably maybe have heard of the Churches of Christ. It's called the Mainline Church of Christ, kind of the main movement. It really has its roots in cessationism, and they were kind of, they really identify with the early Protestant movement, the protests, the Martin Luther, putting the declaration, we're going to follow the Bible. And so the Mainline Church of Christ is this very staunch. So it's the polar opposite, Seth, of the Charismatic Movement. So just in case y'all are wondering, this stuff happens in all of it. So please don't think it's special in one place or the other. So they split, the Mainline Church happens, and they're very staunch. They're very like, they don't even have instruments when they do their music because they believe in, whatever. So this guy comes along named Chuck Lucas, And Chuck Lucas starts doing all this stuff on campuses. He started going to campuses and he started recruiting people on campuses. And they were like, whoa, Chuck is able to he's able to really get people in this movement. And so Chuck Lucas does that. And he's got this protege underneath him named Kip McKean. And he raises Kip up. And basically they split off of the main line and they start the International Churches of Christ, which started in Boston. And they are just seen as they are on fire. And then Chuck is removed for moral failure, for having same-sex physical relations outside of his marriage. And that's where it's left. What people didn't know, and I joined this movement way later. By the time I got there, so Kip set up this very top-down militant structure. There was a lot of spiritual abuse. He was outed. The church split. And so when I came into it, it was like, Kip's gone. He's doing his own thing over there. We're not doing that. We're healthy. So that's what I came into. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't know this from Adam. So here I come along and I'm part of one of the little, churches that's part of this bigger movement that is doing things healthier. And God brought me in at the right time. And, even though they didn't teach on the gifts, I was moving in the gifts. So there's all this good that happened there. They were really big on reading the Bible and talking to Jesus every day. And so I had these kind of foundational pieces that have shaped me in beautiful ways. People were healing to me there. But then I started to notice this shift and this change. And then I'm now working with people and I'm in this professional place and God starts sending me people, not just from this little microcosm, but from the bigger church at large. And come to find out, Chuck Lucas wasn't having consensual relations with men, which is horrible enough. He used his power and his authority to abuse college-age young men is what he was doing. Never came out. They framed it totally different. And then later, Chuck Lucas went on to become a therapist, him and his wife both. And later on, they brought him and his wife back to a conference to show everybody the redemption. Okay? Sick. Well, this sickness stayed. It stayed. And so even though the church I went to was healthy for a bit, because they never fully broke away, they ended up going back in and, those ugly roots. Kip, it turns out much later, was an abuser too. And as you can imagine, the movement attracted a lot of abusers. And I worked with a lot of the fallout and a lot of the damage. And then when it came to happen right in my own backyard, I'm speaking up. And again, wrong things were done. Nobody ever stood up on the pulpit saying, this is wrong. They started to kind of do the right thing and then we're going to protect the image. So I just want everyone to understand that doesn't mean that the church is horrible, but it does mean that if we do the right thing, even in the face of adversity and hardship, and when it's hard, that good things can come. And so I've helped a ton of people heal from this kind of stuff. I have a huge heart for it. God has given me a really, really big heart for it. And, we want to be part of the solution and the healing. But I just also think that we've got to get away from throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This is why the church is bad. This is why everything's bad. No, it's not. It's not. We want to get back to understanding that wolves in sheep's clothing are talked about quite a bit in the New Testament, especially in the prophetic. Does that mean the prophetic is wrong or bad? No. I'm sorry, but if you study out the gifts, it says to eagerly desire the greater gifts. And guess what that is? It's prophecy. So if his prophecy is such a beautiful and special gift, who's going to try to come in and grab the glory for it? The enemy. So we need to be aware and do a better job of things. But we've got to get away from just, that means everything's bad and awful and we can't talk about this stuff. And if you're, on the outside of the church, this is why people think the church is crazy. People, in my experience, do better when things are just honest. And so I just, again, want to say that what the Bethel leadership did when they got up there and tearfully and honestly said, I did this and I did this and I did this. And they're hard things that they did.
And I didn't do this.
Yeah, I didn't do this. And that is a really huge step. And I fully believe if more leaders would do that, then we would see a big shift. So my hope in this is there's an example that they're setting, and that as they continue in the process, could be a great example and could bring us back to being, again, more kingdom connected versus all the disjointed, well, I'm right and I'm right and we're not, we're all part of the same body. Like I said, when we get to heaven, we're not gonna have different places for different denominations. I think that's just really important. And one other quick thing, Seth, I just want to mention, because you and I were talking about this and I feel the Lord on it. So I was telling Seth that as I've gotten into and moved in like inner healing and deliverance for quite some time, that years ago, I came across the spirit, and I don't know what else to name it. And if anybody knows what the name really is, please tell me, because I just call it the stealth spirit because I don't know what else to call it when I'm calling it out. But in the way that the gifting works in me, it really started with just feeling. It was just a feeling gift, and then it became hearing and seeing. But feeling tends to be the strongest. So if I'm praying over somebody and there is deliverance that needs to happen, we can talk about all that in another podcast. When things go, like basically when the demon is cast out, I'll feel it release. But there was a spirit that I connected to years ago where I was praying over somebody and I felt like this big release, and it felt like it should be time to then seal the prayer, you know? And I don't just do straight up deliverance. I know there's a lot of inner healing, forgiveness, all that stuff. So please know that I don't consider myself like a deliverance pastor, because I think deliverance is part of a spoke. But I came across this spirit and it was like, wait a minute, it's released, but it doesn't, it's like something feels veiled or numb. That's the only way I can describe it. And I was like, oh, there's another spirit here that's covering up other things deeper in this person's soul, but it almost can almost make you think like it's all clear, it's all good here. So I named it the stealth spirit, and I would call it out and it came out. So I guess God honored that. That's fine. But I was telling Seth that when I looked at pictures of Shawn Bolz. When I saw pictures of him much younger, I was like, oh, there's the wolf. But when I see pictures of him just in general.
No, when he was younger, you saw truth.
I saw the truth.
Eyes, not wolf.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, but I'm saying when he was younger, I would say it's kind of mid. So not when he was
Okay.
young, but I'm saying when he was, before he was really, really platformed. In that picture, in other words, I could see he'd already been groomed to be a wolf.
Okay.
Like I could
Yeah,
see it.
gotcha. Yeah.
But then later, when I look at all of his pictures, I said to the Lord last night, I was like, it's that stealth spirit. No wonder you can't see it. You almost can't even see the real darkness in his eyes. And usually you can with somebody. But I was like, wow, that's like I think that's the spirit that covers a lot of sociopaths. I'm not here to diagnose Shawn. Somebody else can do that. But whatever that is, it really could cover. And so I just wanted to mention that too. Let's not beat up people because they didn't see it. Let's help the people that have been harmed.
Yeah. And Sandi, you were talking about the prophetic and throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This is just the last thing I'll say. And I know this isn't incomplete. This episode's not complete. There is much more to this, and we'll see where we go. But like I had a friend yesterday that was like, man, I don't even know what I believe about the prophetic now. And and I said, there's a reason why they only check $50 and $100 bills for counterfeits. Part of it is if someone counterfeited a dollar bill, it's not going to cost the store that much. So, you hand them a 50 and they put the little pen on it or stick it under the light and they make sure it's legit because it will cost them too much if it's a counterfeit. But the other side is no counterfeiter is putting their time to $1 bills, $5 bills, $10 bills. They only counterfeit the most valuable things. And to go back to what you were saying, earnestly desire spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. The tendency with something like this is to throw the prophetic out completely, not trust anyone. And at the same time, we've got to look at it through that lens of going, if this gift was counterfeited at this level, it means it's $100 bill. It's not a $1 bill going, you know what, we can just forget this. We can just eliminate this. We don't really need this because someone counterfeited it and I don't know what to trust. No, no, it was counterfeited because it's $100 bill. And the prophetic is very important, very crucial, especially that you may prophesy, Paul said. And so, yeah, I think that's another tendency too, is to go, all this came out. I'm never going to trust the prophetic word again. I'm never going to believe anybody again who speaks and then on behalf of God. Like, no, that was a counterfeit 100, not a counterfeit 1. This is really valuable to the body of Christ. The real thing is very valuable to the body of Christ. And I feel like the real thing is going to shine even more.
Me
And
too.
it'll be easier now to recognize the counterfeits. It'll be much easier now. And the real's going to shine. But all that to say, like, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater anywhere in this. And prophetic's one of those areas.
I love that you said that, because what was coming to me even as you were talking is like, even when it comes to you sitting with somebody and doing, let's say, an inner healing prayer, or deliverance prayer, or both, where you're looking at, the Lord is showing like, this is what's in the soul. It's a prophetic gifting that actually works alongside that for that. I know we think of prophecy as just in like words, but like for me, the Lord gives it to me in a vision. Like meaning I can see I see pictures in the soul basically, and Jesus is working and it's for healing. So it's a very powerful gifting, and many people are blessed and healed through that gifting, which is what it's for. It's to strengthen the body, and it's to encourage the body. And who wants all the glory for himself? Satan wanted to be God. So you don't think he wants to try to come in and capture the prophetic? Of course he does.
Yeah.
You think he doesn't want to hurt people in the prophetic and glean it for himself? Of course he does. But it will probably be that gifting, along with many others, that is going to also help the body to heal. Just like, Seth and I talked about, because the other thing is that when you have a lot of woundedness in your heart, it's a lot harder to discern and hear. I shared it on an old podcast, but my ex-boyfriend, who I had to get a restraining order against, like, none of us are immune to this stuff, you all. He came along at a time when I was in a really wounded place, and he said something that really hooked my heart. And it caused blinders to happen for me. And I said that. I talked about that hook. And I've had people tell me, like, you said that really changed my life. Like, oh my gosh, you're right. Sometimes people use those hooks. Well, I believe that our hearts are less hooked if they're more healed. And the more that I healed, obviously, the better things got, because it wasn't just him. I had deeper things going on at the same time. So I think that, healing is needed more than ever. So thank you, Seth, for this.
Yeah.
This was, I know this was a lot. Like, Seth and I kind of didn't know that this is what we were going to record today, just so you all know that. It was just the Lord put it on each of our hearts. And I know, Seth, just as somebody who knows you and is your friend and loves you, that because of who you are, like, you are really a true man of God. Like, you love the Lord. Like, you love the Lord at a really deep level, and you love God's people. Like, you have a heart for God's people. And that's why when people hear you speak, you shepherd the Father's heart. Like, you really do. And you transcend that to people. And there's a life-giving way that you speak. And so I know that you speaking on this carries a lot of weight. And I also know that personally it's painful. Like, it's you're in process too. So I just want to say that I'm really grateful. I'm really thankful that you wanted to do this today. I really feel like there's a lot on this. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. This is a big process, and man, it's huge,
Yeah.
but we're talking about it some.
And we'll talk more when
Yeah.
it's time.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
talk more.
I'm just thankful for this. This is big journey we're all in now that many people didn't see coming, and many did, but we're in it. And yeah, it's good to start talking even more and keep talking and keep things out in the light. And yeah, thanks, Sandi, for wanting to talk about this too. We both had it on our hearts, so
Crazy.
Here we go.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody who's watched and listened. Again, please share, like, subscribe. This is such an important conversation. I really want to reiterate again that this stuff being in the light, people healing, it is the Father's heart. This is the Lord's heart. This is his heart for his people. And I think we just want to make sure we shepherd it really well. Yeah. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.